Maria Chen pushed her cleaning cart down the long hallway of Harrison University's mathematics building. The wheels squeaked softly in the empty corridor. It was 10 p.m. on a Friday night. All the students had gone home hours ago. All the professors had left their offices. The building belonged to Maria now. She had been working this night shift for 7 years. 7 long years of mopping floors, emptying trash cans, and wiping down chalkboards. Her hands were rough from the cleaning chemicals. Her back ached from bending and lifting. But Maria never complained. She needed this job. Her family needed the money. Maria stopped at room 405. This was Professor David Morrison's classroom. He taught advanced calculus here. Maria always saved this room for last, not because it was dirty, not because it was difficult to clean. She saved it because of the chalkboards. The boards were covered with equations tonight. Long strings of numbers and symbols filled every inch of space. Maria recognized the problems immediately. They were differential equations. The kind that made most students nervous. The kind that required patience and careful thinking. She walked closer to the boards. Her eyes moved across the equations like she was reading a favorite book. In her mind, she could see the solutions. She could trace the paths the numbers needed to follow. It was as natural to her as breathing. Maria had not always been a janitor. Back in South Korea, she had been a mathematics teacher. For 12 years, she had stood in front of classrooms full of students. She had written equations on boards just like these. She had watched young minds grow and understand. Teaching mathematics had been her whole life. Then everything changed. Her husband got a job opportunity in America. They packed their lives into suitcases and flew across the ocean. They arrived in California with hope and dreams. They thought the transition would be smooth. They were wrong. Maria's teaching credentials did not transfer to the United States. Her degree from Seoul National University was excellent, but American schools wanted different paperwork. They wanted specific certifications. They wanted tests in English. The process was long and expensive and complicated. Meanwhile, bills started arriving. Rent, food, insurance. Her husband's new job paid well, but not enough for a family of 4 in California. They needed more income. They needed it immediately. Maria found the janitor job within 2 weeks of arriving. The pay was low but steady. The hours were terrible but available. She told herself it would be temporary. Just a few months until she sorted out her credentials. Just until her English improved. Just until they saved enough money. 7 years had passed since then. Her English had improved significantly. She could have conversations without struggling now, but the recertification process kept getting pushed back. First, her son needed braces. Then her daughter needed a laptop for school. Then the car broke down. Then her mother-in-law got sick and needed help. There was always something more urgent than Maria's dreams. She stood in front of board 3 now. Professor Morrison had left a note at the top. It said Continuation Monday in his quick handwriting. Below the note was an unsolved differential equation. It was complex and beautiful. The kind of problem that made Maria's heart beat faster. She studied it carefully. The setup was good. Professor Morrison knew what he was doing. But Maria could see the solution already forming in her mind. She knew exactly how to approach it. Her fingers itched to pick up the chalk, but she couldn't. That wasn't her job. Her job was to erase these boards and make them clean for Monday. Her job was to be invisible, to clean up after the real mathematicians and disappear before morning came. Maria picked up her eraser. She lifted it to the board. Then she stopped. Something about this problem called to her. It reminded her of a problem she had written for her advanced students back in Seoul. They had struggled with it for days. When they finally solved it, their faces had glowed with pride. Maria remembered that feeling. She missed it terribly. She looked at the door. The hallway was empty. The building was silent. No one would know. Maria set down the eraser. She picked up a piece of chalk instead. Her hand trembled slightly as she touched it to the board. Then years of training took over. Her hand moved with confidence. With purpose. She worked through the problem step by step. Her notation was clean and precise. She showed every stage of the solution clearly. When board 3 filled up, she moved to board 4. The equation flowed from her mind through her hand onto the board like water finding its course. It took her 40 minutes. When she finished, she stepped back and examined her work. She checked it once, twice, 3 times. The solution was correct. She knew it was correct. She could feel it in her bones. Then reality crashed back in. What had she done? She had written all over Professor Morrison's classroom. She had interfered with his lesson. She had crossed a line she had carefully avoided for 7 years. Panic filled her chest. She grabbed the eraser again. She needed to remove everything. She needed to erase the evidence before anyone saw what she had done. But her hand wouldn't move. She stood frozen, staring at the solution on the boards. It was good work. Really good work. For 7 years she had hidden her gift. For 7 years she had pretended to be someone she wasn't. Just this once could she leave proof that Maria Chen the mathematician still existed. She made a decision. She pulled out her phone and took photos of the boards. Photo after photo, capturing every line of her solution. This would be her secret. Proof to herself that she hadn't lost her skills. That all those years of study and teaching hadn't disappeared. Then she put her phone away and continued cleaning. She wiped down the desks. She swept the floor. She emptied the trash can. She did everything a good janitor should do. But she left the chalkboards untouched. Maria pushed her cart out of room 405. Her heart pounded in her chest. Her hands shook slightly. She had taken a risk. A stupid, reckless risk. What would happen Monday morning when Professor Morrison arrived? Would he be angry? Would he investigate? Would she lose her job? She tried to push the thoughts away as she moved to the next classroom. But all night long, as she cleaned room after room, her mind kept returning to those boards, to those equations, to that solution she had written in chalk. For the first time in 7 years, Maria Chen felt like herself again. Like a mathematician instead of just a janitor. The feeling was dangerous. It was frightening. But it was also wonderful. She finished her shift at 6 a.m. As she walked to her car in the gray morning light, she wondered if she had made the biggest mistake of her life. Or maybe, just maybe, she had taken the first step toward finding herself again. Only Monday would tell. The weekend passed slowly for Maria. She couldn't stop thinking about what she had done. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those chalkboards covered with her handwriting. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart jumped. She kept expecting a call from her supervisor. A message saying she was fired. An angry complaint about the janitor who had ruined Professor Morrison's classroom. But no call came. Saturday was quiet. Sunday was quiet. By Monday morning, Maria had almost convinced herself that maybe everything would be fine. Maybe Professor Morrison wouldn't even notice. Maybe he would think one of his students had come in over the weekend. Maria worked her regular shift Monday night. She arrived at the mathematics building at 10 p.m. as always. Her stomach was tight with nervousness as she pushed her cart down the familiar hallways. She had decided to clean room 405 first tonight instead of last. She needed to know what had happened. When she reached the room, she stopped in the doorway. The boards were erased, completely clean. Fresh white chalk sat in the tray. There was no sign of her solution. No sign that she had ever touched those boards. Maria felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. Relief because she hadn't gotten in trouble. Disappointment because her work had disappeared so quickly. Like it had never existed at all. Like she had never existed at all. She pushed her cart into the room and began cleaning. She tried to focus on her work. Tried to forget about the whole thing. It was better this way. Safer this way. She needed to stay invisible. But as Maria cleaned, she noticed something. Professor Morrison had left new problems on the boards. These were even harder than the ones from Friday. They were the kind of problems that would challenge graduate students. The kind that required deep thinking and creative approaches. Maria told herself to ignore them. To do her job and move on. She had learned her lesson. She wouldn't make the same mistake twice. She cleaned for an hour. She mopped the floor. She wiped the desks. She organized the chalk. And all the while, those problems on the boards called to her. She tried not to look, but her eyes kept drifting back. One problem in particular caught her attention. It was a partial differential equation with boundary conditions. Professor Morrison had started a solution, but it was going in the wrong direction. Maria could see where he would get stuck. She could see a better path. An elegant shortcut that would save several steps. She shouldn't interfere. She absolutely should not interfere. She had been lucky once. She shouldn't push that luck. Maria finished cleaning room 405. She pushed her cart toward the door. She would move to the next classroom. She would forget about those equations. She would be a good janitor and nothing more. But her feet stopped moving. She stood in the doorway, her hand on the cart handle, looking back at those boards, at those beautiful, challenging problems that nobody was solving tonight. 7 years. 7 years of walking past boards full of mathematics. 7 years of keeping her knowledge locked inside her head. 7 years of being invisible. Maria turned around. She walked back to the boards. She picked up the chalk. And she began to work. This time she worked faster. Her confidence had grown. The chalk flew across the board as she wrote out solutions. She explained each step clearly. She showed alternative methods. She even added notes about why certain approaches worked better than others. 2 hours passed. Maria solved 3 of the 5 problems Professor Morrison had left. She didn't touch the other 2 because they were simpler. They were good problems for students to solve on their own. When she finished, she stood back and looked at her work. It was good. She knew it was good. But more than that, it felt right. For 2 hours, she had been Maria Chen, the mathematician again. Not Maria Chen, the janitor. Not Maria Chen, the immigrant struggling with paperwork. Just Maria Chen doing what she loved most in the world. The guilt came rushing back as soon as she set down the chalk. What was she doing? This wasn't her classroom. These weren't her problems to solve. She was crossing boundaries that could cost her everything. But she couldn't erase the boards. Not this time. She had already taken the risk. And part of her wanted someone to see. Wanted someone to know that a mind like hers existed, even if they never learned her name. Maria took photos again. Then she left room 405 and finished her cleaning rounds. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Her mind was far away, still working through equations and theories. Tuesday came and went. Maria worked her shift. Room 405 had new problems on the boards. The ones she had solved were erased. But there was something different this time. Professor Morrison had left a note. It said, "To the mystery mathematician, your solutions are remarkable. Please continue." Maria's hand shook as she read those words. He knew. Professor Morrison knew someone was solving his problems. And he wasn't angry. He wanted more. For 3 nights, Maria solved problems. Each night, Professor Morrison left new ones. Each night, they got harder. Each night, Maria rose to the challenge. It became a silent conversation between 2 mathematicians who had never met. A conversation written in chalk and equations. On Friday night, Maria arrived at room 405 and found the most difficult problem yet. It was a challenge that would take hours, the kind of problem that made her feel alive. She set down her cleaning supplies and began to work. She was so focused that she didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway. She didn't see the office door across the hall open slightly. She didn't notice Professor David Morrison watching her through the window. Maria worked on the problem for 90 minutes. She filled 3 boards with careful calculations. She checked and rechecked her work. When she finally found the solution, she smiled. A real, genuine smile, the kind she hadn't felt in years. She set down the chalk and turned to leave. That's when she saw him. Professor Morrison stood in the doorway. He wore jeans and a sweater. His gray hair was messy. His eyes were wide with amazement. He had been watching her. Maria felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. Her face went hot. Her heart hammered in her chest. She had been caught. Finally, truly caught. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. The words tumbled out in a panic. "I shouldn't have touched the boards. I know it's not my job. I know I crossed the line. Please don't fire me. My family needs this job. I'm so sorry. I'll never do it again. I promise." She was mixing English and Korean now. Her accent got thicker when she was nervous. She couldn't look at Professor Morrison's face. She stared at the floor and waited for the anger, for the disappointment, for the consequences, but Professor Morrison didn't sound angry. His voice was soft when he spoke. "That was the most remarkable thing I've ever seen," he said. "Please, don't apologize. Can we talk?" Maria couldn't move. She stood frozen in room 405, still holding the eraser she had grabbed when Professor Morrison appeared. Her mind raced with fear and confusion. Talk about what? About how she had been breaking rules for 2 weeks? About how she deserved to be fired? "I don't understand," Maria said quietly. Her voice shook. "You're not angry?" Professor Morrison stepped into the room slowly, like he was afraid she might run away. "Angry? No, I'm amazed." Confused, yes, but definitely not angry. He gestured toward the boards covered with her solutions. "That problem took me 4 hours to solve yesterday. You did it in 90 minutes, And your method. I've never seen that approach before. Maria looked at the boards, then back at Professor Morrison. This had to be a trick. People didn't react this way. When you broke the rules, there were consequences. When you stepped outside your place, you got pushed back down. I'm just a janitor, Maria said. I shouldn't have touched your boards. It won't happen again. You're not just a janitor, Professor Morrison said firmly. You're a mathematician. A brilliant one. Please sit down. Let me get another chair. He left the room for a moment and returned with a second chair from the hallway. He set both chairs near the front desk. He sat in one and waited. Maria stayed standing, her hands gripping the cleaning cart. I promise you're not in trouble, Professor Morrison said gently. I've been trying to figure out who was solving these problems for 2 weeks. I checked the security footage. I saw you cleaning these rooms every night. But I never thought. He stopped and shook his head. That was my mistake. I made assumptions. Wrong ones. Slowly, carefully, Maria let go of the cart. She sat in the chair, but she stayed on the edge of it, ready to run if she needed to. How long have you been working here? Professor Morrison asked. 7 years, Maria answered, and before that? Maria hesitated. She rarely talked about her past. It was too painful, too full of everything she had lost. But something about the way Professor Morrison looked at her made her want to answer. He wasn't looking at her like she was a janitor. He was looking at her like she was an equal. I was a mathematics teacher in South Korea, Maria said, for 12 years. I taught high school students. Advanced classes, calculus, linear algebra, number theory. Professor Morrison leaned forward. Seoul National University? He asked, noticing the technique in her solutions. Maria nodded. Yes, how did you know? Your method on the differential equations. It's similar to an approach I saw in a paper by Professor Kim Jae-sung. Very elegant, very Korean in its structure. For the first time since Professor Morrison appeared, Maria felt a small spark of something that wasn't fear. It was recognition. Someone understood where her mathematics came from. Someone saw her work and recognized its roots. Professor Kim was my teacher, Maria said quietly, long time ago. He taught me to look for elegant solutions, not just correct ones, elegant ones. He taught you well, Professor Morrison said. So what happened? Why are you cleaning classrooms instead of teaching? The question opened a door Maria usually kept locked. But tonight, with this stranger who looked at her mathematics with respect, she felt that door swing wide open. The words poured out. She told him about the immigration, about the credentials that didn't transfer, about the tests she needed to take, about the money that was never enough, about her family's needs that always came before her own dreams, about 7 years of watching life pass by while she mopped floors and emptied trash cans. Professor Morrison listened without interrupting. His face showed understanding, not pity. When Maria finished talking, they sat in silence for a moment. The system failed you, he said finally. The system that's supposed to recognize talent and put it to use. It failed completely. Maria shrugged. It's okay. I have a job. My family is safe. That's enough. But is it? Professor Morrison asked. Is it really enough? Because the woman I just watched solve that problem didn't look like someone who's given up. She looked like someone who's been starving and finally found food. The words hit Maria hard. She felt tears burning in her eyes. She blinked them back. She wouldn't cry, not here. Not now. What do you want from me? Maria asked. Why are you being kind? Because talent like yours shouldn't be wasted, Professor Morrison said. Because mathematics needs people who love it the way you clearly do. And because maybe if you're willing, I can help. Maria shook her head. I don't need charity. I need my job. Please don't make trouble for me. I'm not talking about charity, Professor Morrison said. I'm talking about opportunity. Look, I don't know all the details of what you need to get recertified, but I know people. I know the system. I've helped international faculty navigate this before. It's complicated, but it's not impossible. It's expensive, Maria said. Very expensive. And it takes time. I don't have either of those things. Maybe not alone, Professor Morrison said. But what if you weren't alone? What if the mathematics department helped? What if I helped? Maria wanted to believe him. But she had learned not to trust easy promises. Why would you do that? You don't know me? I know your mathematics, Professor Morrison said. That's enough. And honestly, I'm being selfish too. The department needs good teachers. Teachers who love the subject. Teachers who can show students that mathematics is beautiful, not just difficult. You could be that teacher. They talked for another hour. Professor Morrison asked about her credentials, her test scores, her education history. Maria answered, though part of her still expected this to be a dream, or a joke, or something that would disappear when the sun came up. Finally, Professor Morrison stood. It's late. You should finish your work. I should go home. But Maria, can we meet again? Maybe during the day? I want to introduce you to some people. Show them what you can do. Maria stood too. I work here at night. I have another job during the day. Part-time at a grocery store. What are your free hours? Tuesday and Thursday mornings. 10 a.m. to noon? Perfect, Professor Morrison said. Come to my office Thursday at 10 a.m., 4th floor. Room 417, we'll make a plan. He started to leave, then turned back. One more thing. Don't stop solving the problems, please. I'll keep leaving them for you. This has been the best teaching experience I've had in years. Even though we never spoke until tonight. After he left, Maria stood alone in room 405. She looked at the boards covered with her solutions. She looked at her cleaning cart waiting by the door. She looked at her rough hands that smelled like chemicals but could still write beautiful equations. Something had changed tonight. Something Maria didn't fully understand yet. But for the first time in 7 years, she felt a tiny seed of hope beginning to grow. It was fragile. It could die easily, but it was there. Maria finished her cleaning shift. As the sun rose over Harrison University, she drove home thinking about Thursday morning. About room 417, about possibility. Thursday morning arrived too quickly. Maria had barely slept since Monday night. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined walking into Professor Morrison's office. She imagined all the ways this could go wrong. Maybe he had changed his mind. Maybe he had talked to other people who convinced him to forget about the janitor with impossible dreams. She almost didn't go. Thursday morning at 9:45 a.m., Maria sat in her car in the university parking lot. Her hands gripped the steering wheel. She could drive away, go to the grocery store for her shift, pretend Monday night never happened, stay safe in the life she knew, but her mathematics textbooks sat on the passenger seat. She had brought them just in case. Just in case this was real. Maria got out of the car. She walked across campus like she was walking toward a cliff edge. Room 417 was easy to find. The door was open. Professor Morrison sat at his desk working on his computer. When he saw her in the doorway, his face broke into a genuine smile. Maria, you came. I'm so glad. Come in, please. Sit down. His office was small but filled with books. Mathematics texts covered every shelf. Papers covered his desk. A chalkboard on the wall had equations scattered across it. It looked like the office of someone who loved mathematics as much as Maria did. I wasn't sure you would come, Professor Morrison said. I thought maybe you'd decide I was crazy. I'm still not sure you're not crazy, Maria said honestly. She sat in the chair across from his desk. This doesn't happen in real life. Professors don't help janitors become teachers. Maybe it should happen more often, Professor Morrison said. But you're right. We have a lot of obstacles. I spent the last 3 days making phone calls and doing research. I want to be honest with you about what this will take. He pulled out a folder. Inside were papers and forms and lists. The credential evaluation process usually costs about $2,000. Then there are teaching exams. California requires the CBEST and the CSET for mathematics. The CSET has multiple parts. Each exam costs money. Then there's the processing time. Usually 6 to 8 months minimum. Maria felt her small seed of hope beginning to wither. $2,000. She didn't have $2,000. She barely had $200 after all the bills were paid each month. Professor Morrison saw her face change. Wait, let me finish. I talked to the department chair, Professor Sandra Williams. I showed her your solutions. She was impressed. Very impressed. The mathematics department has a professional development fund. We use it to help faculty with certifications and training. Professor Williams thinks we could use some of that fund to help you. But I'm not faculty, Maria said. I'm a janitor. For now, Professor Morrison said. But Professor Williams sees potential. She wants to meet you. In fact, he looked at his watch. She wants to meet you in about 10 minutes. Is that okay? Maria's heart started racing again. Now, today? Only if you're comfortable. I know this is fast, but Professor Williams is excited. She doesn't get excited about much. Trust me, this is good. 10 minutes later, Maria found herself in a bigger office on the 5th floor. Professor Sandra Williams was a tall woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a firm handshake. She didn't waste time with small talk. "Professor Morrison showed me your work," she said. "He also showed me his original solutions. Yours were better, more efficient, more elegant. That interests me greatly." Maria didn't know what to say. She just nodded. "Tell me about your teaching experience in Korea," Professor Williams said. For the next 30 minutes, Maria talked about her classes, about her students, about the methods she used, about her philosophy that mathematics should be accessible to everyone, not just naturally gifted students. Professor Williams asked sharp questions. Good questions. Questions that made Maria think carefully about her answers. Finally, Professor Williams sat back in her chair. "Here's what I'm thinking. The department needs good teachers. We're especially short on faculty who can teach night classes. Many of our students work during the day. They need evening options, but most professors want daytime schedules." "I'm used to working nights," Maria said. "Exactly," Professor Williams said. "So here's my proposal. The department will cover your credential evaluation and exam fees. In exchange, once you're certified, you'll commit to teaching at least 2 night classes per semester for 3 years. The pay would be as a lecturer. Not tenure track, but decent. Better than..." She paused delicately. "Better than cleaning and grocery work," Maria finished. "Yes, much better. But there are conditions," Professor Williams continued. "First, you need to pass all the required exams. We can't hire you without proper credentials. Second, while you're working through the certification process, we'd like you to audit some classes. Reacquaint yourself with how American universities teach mathematics. Maybe even guest lecture a few times. Get comfortable in front of American students." "I'm worried about my English," Maria admitted. "My accent is strong." "Your English is fine," Professor Williams said firmly. "And honestly, having diverse voices in our department is valuable. Students need to see that mathematicians come from everywhere, that mathematics is a universal language." Professor Morrison spoke up. "I'd like Maria to audit my advanced calculus class, and maybe give a guest lecture on alternative problem-solving methods. Show the students some of the Korean approaches." Maria felt dizzy. This was happening too fast. It was too much. "I still have my jobs," she said. "The cleaning job. The grocery job. I can't just quit. My family needs that income." "We understand," Professor Williams said. "We're not asking you to quit." "Not yet. Take the time you need. Study for the exams. Audit classes when you can. Once you're certified, then we can talk about full-time work." They talked for another hour about schedules and timelines and details. When Maria finally left, she had a folder full of papers and a head full of information. She also had something else, something she had almost forgotten she could feel. She had hope, real hope. Not the fragile seed from Monday night, but something stronger, something that might actually grow. Maria went to her shift at the grocery store. She stocked shelves and helped customers. But her mind was far away. She was thinking about exams and certifications and classrooms full of students. She was thinking about standing at a chalkboard not to clean it, but to teach from it. That night, she worked her cleaning shift at the university. When she reached room 405, she found a new note from Professor Morrison. It said, "For my colleague Maria, here's a challenging problem for the weekend. Take your time. Enjoy it, colleague." He had called her a colleague. Maria set down her cleaning supplies. She picked up the chalk, and she began to solve the problem with a smile on her face. For the first time in 7 years, she wasn't just surviving, she was beginning to live again. The next 3 months passed in a blur. Maria studied for her exams every spare moment. She audited Professor Morrison's class twice a week. She met with Professor Williams monthly to track her progress. And every night she solved problems on the boards in room 405. The students started noticing her. The janitor who sat in the back of the lecture hall taking notes. Some ignored her. Some were curious. One brave student asked her a question about derivatives after class. Maria explained the concept clearly. The student's eyes lit up with understanding. Professor Morrison saw the exchange. Later that week, he asked Maria if she would be willing to do something scary. Something that would change everything. He wanted her to teach. Maria stood outside room 405 holding a piece of paper. Her hands shook so badly she could barely read the words. It was a lesson plan. Her lesson plan. For the guest lecture she was supposed to give in exactly 10 minutes, Professor Morrison had convinced her to do this. He said she was ready. He said the students would benefit from her perspective. He said it would be good practice for when she got certified, but Maria wasn't ready. How could she be ready? She was still a janitor. She still mopped these floors 5 nights a week. Now she was supposed to stand in front of these same students and teach them mathematics. It was insane. She could leave. Just walk away. Tell Professor Morrison she got sick. He would understand. No one would blame her. But then Maria thought about the last 3 months. All the studying. All the work. All the hope she had allowed herself to feel. If she walked away now, she would prove right every doubt she had ever carried. Every voice that told her she was just a janitor. Just an immigrant. Just someone who should accept her place and stop dreaming. Maria took a deep breath. She folded the lesson plan and put it in her pocket. She didn't need it anyway. She knew this material better than she knew anything else in the world. She walked into room 405. 30 students sat in the chairs, talking and laughing. They fell quiet when they saw her. Some looked confused. They recognized her as the janitor who sometimes sat in the back during lectures. What was she doing at the front of the room? Professor Morrison stood near his desk. He smiled at Maria encouragingly. Everyone, I want to introduce you to Maria Chen. She's going to give today's lecture on alternative approaches to differential equations. Please give her your full attention. He sat down in a chair in the back. Now it was just Maria and 30 pairs of eyes watching her. Hello, Maria said. Her voice came out quieter than she wanted. She cleared her throat and tried again. Hello. My name is Maria Chen. I know some of you have seen me cleaning this building. Yes, I am the janitor, but I am also a mathematician. She turned to the chalkboard. Her hand found the chalk naturally. It felt like coming home. Today I want to show you a different way to think about the problems Professor Morrison has been teaching. Not a better way, just different. In Korea, where I learned mathematics, we approach these problems from another angle. Maria began to write on the board. As soon as the chalk touched the surface, her nervousness disappeared. This was her language. This was where she belonged. She worked through a complex differential equation step by step. But she didn't just show the solution. She explained why each step mattered. She showed the beauty in the mathematics. She made the students see the patterns and connections. 15 minutes into the lecture, a student raised his hand. That's way easier than how Professor Morrison taught it. Why didn't we learn this method first? Both methods are good, Maria said. Different problems need different tools. The more ways you know to solve something, the better mathematician you become. Don't think there is only one right way. Mathematics has many paths to the same answer. Another student asked a question. Then another. Maria answered each one clearly. Her accent didn't disappear, but it didn't matter. The students understood her. More importantly, they were interested. 50 minutes passed like 5 minutes. When the class period ended, several students came to the front to ask more questions. They wanted to know where Maria had learned mathematics. They wanted to know if she would teach more classes. They wanted to know how she could solve problems so easily. One young woman stayed after everyone else left. She looked nervous. Ms. Chen, can I ask you something personal? Of course, Maria said. I'm a first-generation college student, the young woman said. My parents don't speak English well. They work in a factory. Sometimes I feel like I don't belong here, like I'm not smart enough. But watching you today, you made math make sense for the first time. And knowing that you work as a janitor, but you're also this amazing mathematician, it gives me hope. If you can do it, maybe I can too. Maria felt tears threatening again. She had spent years feeling invisible, feeling like she didn't matter. Now this student was telling her that she had given her hope. You can do it, Maria said firmly. You absolutely can do it. Don't let anyone make you feel small. Not even yourself. After the student left, Professor Morrison came to the front. That was incredible, Maria. You're a natural teacher. The students loved you. It felt good, Maria admitted. Really good. I forgot how much I missed this. How are the exam preparations going? Professor Morrison asked. I take the CBEST next week, Maria said. Then the CSET mathematics sections in November and December. If I pass everything, I should have my credentials by March. You'll pass, Professor Morrison said confidently. I have no doubts. The next 4 months were the hardest of Maria's life. She worked 2 jobs. She studied every free moment. She took exams that made her nervous despite her knowledge. She waited for results that took forever to arrive. But she also guest lectured 3 more times. Each time she felt more comfortable, more confident, more like herself. In March, the final credential approval arrived in the mail. Maria stared at the official document for a long time. After 7 years, she was certified to teach mathematics in California. Professor Williams offered her the job the same day. 2 night classes per semester, lecturer position, real salary, benefits. Everything Maria had stopped allowing herself to dream about. She gave notice at the grocery store immediately. The cleaning job was harder to leave. She had worked with the same team for 7 years. They had become friends, but they were happy for her. They threw her a small party on her last night. They wrote messages on a card about how they always knew she was special. The following semester, Maria Chen walked into room 405 for the first time as the instructor. Her name was written on the board behind her, Professor Maria Chen, Introduction to Calculus Night Section. She looked out at the classroom. It was full. 35 students had enrolled. Many of them were older students, working adults, people taking classes after their jobs, people like Maria herself. Among them, she noticed 3 janitors from her old team. They had asked if they could take her class. Maria had helped them enroll. Also in the room were 2 security guards, a cafeteria worker, and a woman who worked in the university bookstore. People who worked during the day and dreamed of something more at night. "Welcome," Maria said to her class. Her voice was strong now, confident. "My name is Professor Chen. Some of you may know that until last month I was a janitor in this building. I cleaned this very room 5 nights a week for 7 years. While I cleaned, I watched other people teach mathematics. I watched other people learn mathematics, and I waited for my turn." She picked up the chalk and turned to the board. "Tonight is my turn, and tonight is your turn too. It doesn't matter what job you work during the day. It doesn't matter how long it took you to get here. What matters is that you're here now, and I'm going to teach you that mathematics is for everyone, not just for people who look like traditional students, not just for people who speak perfect English, for everyone who wants to learn." Maria began to write on the board. The chalk felt perfect in her hand. The equations flowed naturally. Behind her, she heard the sound of pencils moving across paper as her students took notes. For the first time in 7 years, Maria Chen was exactly where she belonged. Not because someone gave her permission, not because someone felt sorry for her, but because she had never stopped being a mathematician, even when the world told her she was just a janitor. Some dreams take longer than others. Some paths are harder than others. But Maria had learned that the length of the journey didn't matter. What mattered was refusing to give up. What mattered was that moment when you finally wrote your name on the board and claimed the space that had always been yours. Professor Maria Chen smiled at her students and began to teach.